Hello everyone, and thanks for joining this session on Email Design Fundamentals in Action for the Virtual Clicks 2020. I'm going to be presenting this today. My name is Gemma Hindhaugh and I am one of the designers here at Communicator. So on the agenda for this presentation, firstly, we're going to talk about designing email and the importance of designing email and how it can help to achieve the purpose of email. And then we're going to break down each of the design fundamentals that should be considered when designing an email. And then we're going to go through some examples of existing emails that I took from my inbox and see whether they have followed the design fundamentals and how they can be adopted if they have not. So design an email. So firstly, let's go back to basics and cover the purpose of an email. So there are two main purposes of an email. One is to convey a message through the content, and then another is to encourage an action. So clicks through to website, to donate, to book now, basically any kind of click or action that the user should take from reading the email. So I've broken down the importance of email into three sections, all things that the design of an email can help to improve. So the first one is that can help you to stand out in the inbox. So obviously, we've got very crowded inboxes these days. You're fighting for the user's attention. And not only that, but we're also competing with other media outlets like social media for the reader's time. So any social media platforms like Instagram, Twitter, these are all things that also take up the reader's time. So design could really be the swing factor in whether someone chooses to read your email over other emails and over other social platforms. Another important thing that design can really improve is your brand reputation. So a great looking email can really improve the way a user thinks about your brand. So I know that when I receive a really great email in my inbox, I'm thinking, oh wow, this company has really took the time and effort into their email marketing, and they really care about the way that the user is going to interact with that email. Whereas similarly, a poorly designed email could kind of negatively impact your brand and give the user a really bad experience that they then reflect upon the brand itself. So you can use design as a way to reflect your brand values in a positive way by creating a positive email experience for the user. And the third thing is it can help captivate your audience. According to Litmus, the average reading time of an email is about 13.4 seconds. So you really want your design to deliver your message in a really succinct way and get that content across as quickly as possible so the reader has more of a chance of reading it. So you want to think about if your email design is making the user want to stay and keep reading, or if it's going to make them want to click away and move on to a different email or move on to something else. So to get into the design fundamentals, I'll quickly go over each one and then we'll get into them in further detail shortly. So we've got the inverted pyramid, content hierarchy, the layout, white space, mobile responsiveness, dark mode, accessibility, effective CTAs and buttons, and branding and imagery. So the first one, the inverted pyramid, this is a kind of visual principle that is often used to guide the reader's eye. So if you look at this example, you can see the triangle that is leading the reader's eye from the image to that button. So it's kind of like a visual effect that often starts with an image and then has title, text, body copy, and a button that narrows to a point. And this aims to draw the user's eye to that button and drive engagement with the thing that you want the user to click on. So you can see in this other email example that they've used this principle there by using the image narrowing down to that button, which makes the user want to click. So number two, we've got content hierarchy. So hierarchy is a really good thing to use to help lead the user's eye around the email. So if you take this email by Com, for example, the first thing that you see is that big text that says 50% off. And then the eye generally goes to that big blue CTA. So you're getting those two most important things hit first when the user opens the email. So you've got 50% off and then click to view offer. So you can use text size and font weight, so making it really bold and big to help that user see that key information first. And then once they've read that information, they then go to that secondary text, which is smaller and less impactful. So that is the secondary information that they read afterwards. And thirdly, we have layout. So layout can include things like columns, whether you've got a feature header or not, the length of the email, how many images you use and the image to text ratio, and also your content distribution. So which content you have where. So if you can see in these examples, booking.com, it includes a feature header, which is one column, which is one big image. And then they've got two columns to show that secondary information of those other holidays. And then they've got one column to show another offer. So having these different styles of columns really helps give more of a flow to the email and helps distribute the content in an effective way. And then for this Yelp email, they have applied a 3-column layout to these 3 bullet points, which helps the information be more succinct as it's in one row rather than spread on top of 3 if each bullet point was stacked. So thinking about the layout in your email could be a really good way to make your content more interesting and have a bit of better flow. And next up, we have white space. So this is the space around the content, and it doesn't have to be white. It can just be any color as long as it's the space that doesn't have any content in. So it doesn't have any text, images, or anything like that in. And this is used to help content breathe. You can see it in this email by index. They've got a lot of white space and they're using that really effectively to separate out each section. So each of those main titles has plenty of room to breathe and they're not getting all mixed up with each other. This helps to aid legibility and helps distribute the content effectively. So you can see in this example where white space could be better implemented. This email is very busy. It's got a lot of text. It's got a lot of places to click, a lot of places to look, and there's really not a lot of white space. There's quite a lot of heavy content saturating this email. But if they applied the technique of using white space, they could spread out this information in a more effective way. And the next fundamental is mobile responsiveness. Now, this is a really important one because around 50% of emails are opened on mobile. So this example from Headspace, you can see, is a really good example of a mobile responsive email. So there's no need to zoom in and scroll around to access the content. I know that if I opened an email on mobile and it wasn't responsive at all, I would just click off personally. Ways that you can make your email responsive is to have full width images and buttons and maybe change up the font size to suit mobile if it's maybe too big or too small in comparison to your desktop's font size. And if you want to check how your emails look on mobile, you can always send a test to your phone or use our content checker on Communicator to see how your email appears in all the different email clients. And number 6 is accessibility. So it's really important to try and make your email as accessible as possible so that everyone can enjoy your email. And these are some of the things that you can do to make sure that it's accessible as possible. So firstly, you make sure that you use alt tags on all images. So for example, in this email, your alt tag within the image would be Pink Thursdays back 19/11/20. So that means that with a screen reader, they're going to read that text and the user isn't going to miss out. Whereas if that alt tag was left blank, the user would miss out on that important information. Another thing you can do is make sure that you have a minimum text size of 16 pixels. This just means that it's easier to read and more legible for more users. And as well as adjusting the text size, it's always best to have left aligned text, especially in big blocks of text, like big paragraphs. Because with center aligned text, it makes it harder for the user to read because the eye is having to dart from one end of the sentence to the next to try and find out where the next line begins, whereas with left-aligned text, it always begins on the left, so it's a lot easier to read. Another really key thing to take into consideration when you're designing an email is using enough contrast with your colors. So for example, if I was to use this pink on this gray, that would not make for an accessible email, because as you can see, using this online color contrast checker, this color combination fails on all aspects of the accessibility guidelines. Whereas changing it to this pink on a white background, you can see that it passes. So you can use online contrast checkers such as this one, colorcontrast.cc, to put in your foreground color and your background color. And it just means that it's going to tell you whether it passes or fails, judging on the accessibility guideline standards. So next up is your buttons and CTAs. So you've got loads of different style of buttons that you can use. You can use ones with rounded corners, square corners, ghost buttons like the one on the bottom. Now all of these can serve different purposes, but it's important that your CTAs are bold and that you try and use more enticing language that encourages an action like book now or sign up now, giving the user a real sense of urgency to click. Something that I encourage is having primary and secondary buttons. So for your main CTA, the main purpose of the email, the thing that you want your user to click, have a really bold color. And then maybe for your secondary buttons, have a less bold color, or use a ghost button, such as the one on the bottom where it's just an outline. This just helps the user to know where to click. Another key thing is to try and ensure your CTA is always at least 40 pixels high. Now this kind of ties in with the accessibility, but it basically means that your user isn't going to have trouble clicking, and that kind of corresponds with the average thumb size. So it means that your user isn't going to have trouble clicking, especially on using a phone, if you make sure it's at least 40 pixels in height. Next up, we've got making sure your emails are on brand. So this helps to create a consistent and familiar user experience across all your digital marketing. So upon opening the email, your user knows who it's from and what to expect. So for example, this is Virgin Atlantic's website, and this is their email that they send out. And you can see the colors are on brand. You've got the logo there to provide instant recognition to the reader, so they know instantly upon opening the email who it's from. They've got the same CTA style and the same colored text and the same fonts, which are all things that can really help to create that on-brand feel. So looking at your website is a really great place to start. If you're unsure of how to get an email that looks on brand, you can just take their colors and fonts and apply it to the email to create that consistent user experience. And finally, we have dark mode. This is something that is becoming way more popular these days, with Apple and Google and Outlook creating dark mode options for their users. And these are some examples of how dark mode emails can appear. And users might opt for dark mode because it can reduce eye strain, especially if you're in a dark room or at night. And it can also be easier on the battery life because it's not showing that really bright screen that can drain your phone battery. So there are a few things to be careful of when designing your email for dark mode. And if you can see on this example on the left, this email from Yeo Valley, they've used quite a lot of JPEG images, which show this white background, which can look really harsh against the dark mode of the email. So one thing that you can do to make sure that these don't show up with the white background is just to add them into your emails as PNGs with a transparent background. But if doing this, make sure to have a white border around, or be wary because a black image on this dark background, as you can see under the main header image where it says Seasoned Sweetings, that is a PNG of black text, and that's not as easy to see on the dark background. But if you were to add a border around that, a white border, then it would look normal in light mode, but it would just make sure that image is easy to see in dark mode. And I've recently done a blog post all about dark mode where I've gone further into detail on each of these. So if you are interested, then you can look on the Communicator blog for more information and examples. So those are all of the fundamentals, but one last thing to note is test. Testing is super important, and it's one of the most important steps, because I'm sure, as we all know, Outlook can behave sporadically and not do what we tell it to. So it's really important that you check your email on all your different devices and email providers to make sure all your hard effort spent on designing a great email doesn't go to waste. Now, again, you can do this in Communicator's content checker if you'd like, where you can see how the email would look among all the different email providers and devices. So next up, we're going to look at some emails in action and look at if they follow the design fundamentals that we've just gone through. So we've got this email first up from End Clothing. Now, things that they're doing well, or they've got plenty of white space within their email. They're applying the inverted pyramid principle of the image narrowing down to that main CTA. They've got a really bold CTA, which is easy to see. Where they have room for improvement is they've got a bit of a lack of layout. They could have had this section in 2 or 3 columns just to reduce the height of the email and make that area a bit more succinct. And also in dark mode, their social icons are dark, which means they're really hard to see and might end up getting lost off if a user is going to look at that email in dark mode. And we've also got this email from Techno Gym. So things that they're doing well that align with the design fundamentals is they're very on brand. This black and yellow scheme is all through their website, so they're definitely on brand there. They've got these big bold CTAs, which are more than 40 pixels in height and get a tick for boldness. However, the yellow on the grey background fails the contrast checker for the colours. So to improve this email, they would need to change the colours around slightly to make sure that they are as accessible as possible. And we've got this email from Dot Mason. So things that they're doing well is they're very on brand. However, this contrast with the red on top of the green does not pass the contrast checker. So changing that to a different colour would be preferred. Another thing they could improve is that their content are all added into this email as images. So that's going to be really bad for screen readers because the email isn't going to pick up any content. But they are applying a 2-column layout, which is good as it helps bring a flow to the email and break up the content nicely. And they're also using ghost buttons, which can often be an effective button choice to use. So now that I've given some examples of some emails that are using some of the design fundamentals, I'm going to show you how you can apply them and put them in practice to improve an email that I got in my inbox, which I thought could do with a bit of sprucing up. So I received this email in my inbox from Vampira Rose, who are wholesale jewelers. And the purpose of this email is to remind customers that they're offering free shipping on all orders, and the main call to action is for customers to visit their site in order to place an order. So if we think about the design fundamentals, there are a few things that they could apply to make this email more functional, more succinct, in an aim to achieve its purpose. So some things that this email could improve on are it's currently using all center aligned text, which goes against the accessibility standards and would be better and easy to read if it was left aligned. There's also a bit too much text in this top section. It's not really effective in getting the message across, and it takes quite a bit of reading to find out what they're actually trying to say. Also, the colours and the fact that a lot of this text is uppercase makes it quite hard to read. The switch between white and black text over the purple background is quite harsh on the eyes and could definitely be improved. There's also a CTA in there somewhere, believe it or not, which is very easily missed. That CTA is trying to get the customer to visit the website, but I definitely missed it when I opened the email. So that could definitely be improved as well. So moving further down the email, the CTAs under each image aren't very bold and the red text is off-brand. These could definitely be made into easier clickable buttons. some of this content is actually also repeated. So they've got some of the same CTA more than once, which is just unnecessarily elongating the email and possibly confusing the user. One final thing that they could improve is the social channels are getting a bit lost at the bottom. They could definitely be amended in the hierarchy to make sure those social channels are a bit more visible. So I've mocked up a bit of an example of putting some of those design fundamentals into practice to see how we can improve the email. So by applying a few simple changes, you can see that the email is now fulfilling its purpose a lot more effectively. So some of the things that I've changed is I've given context straight away by adding this big banner and header image to let the customer know straight away as soon as they open the email that there's free shipping on all orders, which was part of the text that was getting a bit lost on the message before. I've also added a bold and clear CTA for the user to shop on the website. Whereas this before was just a line of clickable text, it's now a bold CTA that is hard to be missed. I've also adjusted the colours, so removed that purple background from the text and just made it a really easy to read black text over a white background, and also taken into account the white space within the email and made sure that elements have enough room to breathe. In adjusting this top section, I've also left aligned the text so it's easy to read and is more accessibility friendly. I've also bolded some of the key information and reduced the uppercase from the text to make sure that it's as easy to read as possible. I've also condensed the footer and made the social icons bolder in an attempt to drive more traffic to the social channels. And in this product section, I've also added easy to click buttons underneath each image and made sure that none of it is repeating, which results in a more short and succinct email. And lastly, using the inverted pyramid technique within the header, I've made sure that that top information is leading to that point to try and draw the user's eye towards that big CTA. So overall, I hope you would agree that this is a more functional and easy to read email that's been achieved by applying a few of the design fundamentals that we've just gone through. And so to summarize, design is important. It can have a really big effect on whether the aim of an email is achieved and how effective the content of the email comes across to the user and how they digest that information. So something that you could go away and think about is how many of the design fundamentals are your emails following, and are there any quick wins you can apply like I did with that example to make sure your content is effective and achieving its purpose. So thank you for listening, and hopefully that was helpful and you might be able to take away some things to apply to your emails. But if you have any questions at all, please feel free to email me at gemma.heintoff@communicatorcorp.com, and I will be more than happy to answer any of the questions that you've got. Thank you again, and I hope you have a great day.